Today we're looking at the Laguna Madre project. Um, the Laguna Madre was formed 3,000 years ago after the stabilization of the sea level on the Texas coast, culminating in the rise of Padre Island. The Baffin Bay extension is considerably older than Laguna Madre and formed as a river valley during um, the epoch about 12,000 years ago. Um, so our mission is to produce biological productivity. In other words, to sequester vast amounts of carbon, while paying for it with the seafood and the viable living products that will be produced in the water from that organic carbon. Um, these regions are of interest because of two reasons. One is they're not very old. 3,000 years is not long enough for anything to evolve a complete dependency on this area. So other than a few of the animals, possibly the whooping crane or others, there's nothing that would be endangered by altering this ecosystem. And in fact, this is a fugitive ecosystem. In other words, this area is at sea level or below, and there is no hope. There is no scientific method within the realm of feasibility to stop the encroachment of ocean seawater into these areas. Okay, that means that all of these hypersaline and environments will all equalize in salinity with the ocean and actually become part of the ocean within a few meters of sea level rise. So there is zero probability or chance that this ecosystem will exist or survive beyond maybe 100 years from now, possibly as little as 50. As a matter of fact, some of the effects of the change in the climate and the deeper ocean swells from what storms do occur is already altering this ecosystem. Okay, our interest is in the portion of the ecosystem south of Port Mansfield. And the reason for that is that we approach an area where mangroves will not survive more than a decade north of it, because at least once every 10 years there's a deep snap freeze of some sort that will generally wipe them out. Most of this area, the plant that will most likely provide productive surface forestation is the black mangrove, and black mangroves are already colonizing the area in a fairly detrimental way, right along the usually on a tide line, right along these black specks are in fact I believe these are black mangroves. So you might think that's a good thing, but depending on how they colonize and how they cluster, it can be a bad thing. If they have difficulty handling the cold air, the clusters that survive long term become suffocating dense clusters that deprive the area and ecosystem to other animals, birds, and such. This isn't a major problem yet, as you see the colonies are relatively small. But this is how natural mangroves will colonize an area. And the thing to understand about engineered ecosystems is we don't necessarily just accept what is randomly given to us by natural processes. we will plant or place or transplant and move all the mangroves till there's no clump of mangroves that is within 10 meters of another clump of mangroves. So while this entire area may be covered, and there may be different structural mounds created to support the mangroves, there will always be at least a 10-meter distance between them. And if all goes to plan, the mangroves themselves will actually reduce the turbidity in the water from the dredging and other things. And we should have very nice fields of seagrass under the mangroves. And that will happen by an intentional engineered act. And the increase in organic carbon that will be available to that ecosystem will cause natural explosions in populations of seafood, of animals and food in the water, and this will make the area an incredibly economically wealthy area because of all the seafood that will be coming out, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 ton per hectare. And that provides enough revenue so Texas Parks and Wildlife, the Federal Reserve, because these will go on both state and federal land, or technically not land, but in the water, and this will be completely self-funding. So in this particular project, we are looking at a very large area before we're done. I think we'll find that we're somewhere around 133 square miles of total aquatic forestation. Now, the first phase that Robert's working on right now is the phase related to the SpaceX facility in Boca Chica, and these areas, including the Las Palomas Wildlife Management Area and the Boca Chica State Park. These will continue to be managed areas. We're talking about an engineered ecosystem. We're not talking about human encroachment or converting the property to something that does not support the existing animals and inhabited life forms, non-human, within the area. In fact, the influx of organic carbon from the sparse forestation provides huge benefits, whereas the sparse forestation, if you're able to control yourself and only put 1 clump of plants every 10 meters, then you will create this ecosystem that supports everything that was already growing there, plus 100 times more. So these 2 wildlife management areas would become engineered ecosystems, and then going up to the mangrove line, where even black mangroves can't survive above it, we would do our 133 square miles of sparse forestation. It should cost in the neighborhood of $150 per plant mound to create these plant mounds, if we're doing it with the help of mechanized machinery, and we have everything planned out ahead of time. This comes up to roughly 100 of these per hectare, and of course 10,000 per square kilometer, which is 100 times 100 um, for the 100 hectares. So what we end up with, and each of these hectares is good for probably 1 ton of seafood a year, um, 2 tons of organic carbon. Uh, Now, when we say organic carbon sequestration, everybody knows trees take in carbon. What people apparently aren't aware of is that that carbon falls on the ground, rots, turns back into CO2, and returns to the atmosphere. That's part of the cycle of life. Some portion of that carbon stays in the ground and gets buried, and so a small amount of that is removed long term from the atmosphere. But if that organic carbon falls in the water, it will get consumed and go into the aquatic ecosystem. And while the carbon will get oxidized one way or another by a plant or a microbe, the resulting product will be carbonates. And those carbonates will be naturally mineralized, and in the vast bulk of that will not return to the atmosphere as CO2, but will end up becoming part of a rock. This is the ideal scenario when it comes to taking all that carbon out of our atmosphere and hiding it away to prevent it turning our atmosphere into a high CO2 environment. So this is the region of this project. Now, when people ask about the lawsuits, there's a lot of confusion and, of course, intentional misinformation. We are not suing the state of Texas. We are not suing the federal wildlife authorities. Okay, what we're suing is there's a cost involved in taking this carbon out. And so we're suing for that cost to be paid to us as we take the carbon out. Now, you're probably saying, well, what is that cost? All right, this isn't a tax. I'm being forced to do this because somebody else did something, and that somebody else made money off of what they did without setting aside the money to clean up the problem they create. So we're demanding $7,500 per ton, which is roughly how much money an oil or gas company makes from selling a product that puts carbon into the atmosphere at $7,500 a ton. And that money, the connection of that lawsuit to the environmental protection organizations, the conservation organizations, of which we understand true conservation is no longer possible. These people putting that carbon in the atmosphere have made this a fugitive ecosystem. People say, well, why hasn't Texas state saved us from it? Well, I don't know, but as of right now, I'm having to save us from the CO2 in the atmosphere, which I will do, but I am requiring that every time somebody puts a ton of CO2 into the atmosphere, if you're going to sell something for a ton of hydrocarbons for $7,500, I'm suing you, and I expect a very conservative Supreme Court to respect my natural rights to not have to pay out of my pocket to clean this mess up, and to enforce my lawsuit against each and every company and organization that's putting carbon into the atmosphere. Because the real cost of putting a ton of carbon in the atmosphere is $7,500. And I'm being asked to spend my $7,500 to remove that carbon from the atmosphere. Okay? And the amount of money they made committing that moral crime that we know they're aware is and was a moral crime is the strict liability for that. And so this is already costing the parks and wildlife. This is already costing the federal ecosystems, and that cost will be completely paid. And truth be told, if they were to go about doing protective measures, they would be spending in the billions of dollars, and the true cost of that carbon going into the atmosphere is probably higher than $7,500 per ton. But by strict, absolute moral liability, I'm owed that much every time I pull a ton of CO2 out of the atmosphere, and I will be demanding that that be paid with the full force of the United States military supporting me on the collection of that cost. Okay? Because that's what it costs. So prepare for the cost of gasoline to go up by roughly $7,500 a ton. You go figure out how much that is to fill your gas tank, because me and my electric vehicle won't be paying any of it. Okay? Because my solar charged electric vehicle isn't creating any of that cost, and it doesn't owe any of that money. And if you're a moral human being, you can do the same. But to some extent, you are being forced to participate in a crime and a violation. Okay? So you are being made morally damaged. You are being defiled by being forced to be a part of this criminal activity, and we need to close this lawsuit and fix that problem. Okay, I know people talk about cap and trade, when some token $140 a ton for carbon, $150. Nobody can do anything with carbon for $150. That's just plain old lying deception. The reason the oil and gas companies throw around numbers like that is because that's what they want it to be. Okay? That's not what it is. It starts at $7,500 a ton and goes up. And we're demanding the entire price. Now, if some oil company researcher wants to come up with some other way to remove carbon from the atmosphere, more power to them. As a matter of fact, Elon Musk will give them $100 million or whatever he's putting up. All right? I don't want Elon Musk's money. Elon Musk did not create this thing. There's no judge, there's no court in the moral human universe that would say that Elon Musk owes me $100 million to remove carbon out of the atmosphere. Elon Musk didn't put that carbon in the atmosphere. And he is already volunteered to pay the $7,500 per ton for the CO2 that SpaceX creates, for the carbon that they put into the atmosphere. And and in the end, we will be getting all of the carbon that he uses in his rockets from the atmosphere and providing the rocket fuel he needs in a zero carbon, completely compensated system. More details about that later, maybe on the next Joe Rogan podcast. For right now, we are doing this, okay? The group of organizations, Extinction Rebellion, the Sea Shepherds, the Greenpeace, I believe all of the organizations are on board. So when they show up to do this forestation, everybody's saying, well, why don't they go get their hands dirty in a field? Well, they're going to, okay? But they're going to show up. They're going to show up with a vengeance. They're going to show up en masse, okay? We already own land on Padre Island, so you can't stop them from coming. We will solve this problem. Now, in the process, the views from Padre Island will be of a beautiful manicured forestation that may even arrange the trees to be have a natural appearance. But whatever's done, there'll be 10 meters between them, and there'll be fish jumping out of the water, and tourism and fishing and game fishing and uh, crabs and lobsters and whatever um, delicacies that we like to eat will be plentiful from this region, starting from now. There's a separate project south of the Rio Grande. We'll make a video probably in Spanish about that, but this area right here, from the Rio Grande north through Boca Chica, and then through through the Laguna Madre up till to Redfish Bay. Now, a telltale sign that we're probably too far north for black mangroves to survive will is about to become apparent because we're about to have a 10-year frost, and if there are any colonies of black mangroves up this far north, it's likely they'll be attenuated or eliminated at this frost. Although I don't have the latest satellite imagery. So that's the Laguna Madre plan, and the details of the legal action that is already in process. And we're working on getting notice of lis pendus appropriately filed. So if you have questions, put them on. Feel free to contact stp@utpe.org, and I'm not going to type it on the screen, and I'm not going to put it in a link. stp@utpe.org. So, Unpolluting Technologies for Planet Earth is utpe.org, and you can email the team at stp@utpe.org if you have ideas, suggestions. If you're going to be part of one of the invasion teams, you'll want to work with your local Extinction Rebellion chapter or the other organizations that have asked me not to mention their names, and they will work out all the legalities and getting visas and all the stuff that you might need to come for the mangrove planting and conversion. So just contact me at my email address or the organization's email address and tell me what you think.